We watch CoffeeZilla? Yeah, I think we should. CoffeeZilla has a new video where he covers, there's been all this AI bubble talk from a variety of sorts. I gotta say this. Okay, you know what? Honestly, this is how it's felt lately. Because people keep linking me these videos like it's right up your alley. I feel like there's like this converging between like how money works and CoffeeZilla and me. And we're all reading the same stuff. Like we used to have our own little niches and now it's all converging. And it's also at the same time as like a lot of other people are getting into like the Gen Z affordability crisis and the AI, like Hank Green's in here somewhere. Like everyone's covering Hank Green made a video called like, why are all presidents born in the same year? Which is like, Trump is 79. He's younger than Biden is now, but older than Biden was at this time in his term. He's the oldest president ever inaugurated, which is Trump now. Do you know how
old
Bill Clinton is?
Bill Clinton's like now, like 80,
right now.
83, 84?
I don't know, 89? He seems pretty old.
79, same age.
Oh my God.
Do you know how old George W. Bush is?
85.
79, same age.
It's the same.
So like we're just all converging, dude. We're all converging on the same topics. I'm not actually worried about it, but I thought about it today. I was like, bro, I gotta start thinking about things that'll be interesting in 18 months. I feel like the things I've been talking about are now hitting, everyone's talking about it. However, it is interesting hearing other people's takes on these things, even if we're coming from similar sources, because they bring unique things to the table. I actually really want to know what Coffee thinks about this, but the idea is that because of all this AI bubble stuff that's going around, Nvidia, instead of ignoring it, has been sending reports to sell-side analysts who kind of rate the stock and basically making an argument that they're not Enron, that there is no AI bubble, and they go point by point and explain like why they think that's not the case. The real response is to like Michael Burry. Michael Burry launched a Substack, which I've been reading. It's a little pricey. I'm gonna be honest with you, I gotta stop real quick. Michael Burry, it's a little pricey, your Substack. You are a millionaire. This Substack is $379 a year. I bought it because it's a business expense. He's been leading the charge on the Nvidia overvalued thing, and now Nvidia's pushing back. Maybe CoffeeZilla gonna say the exact same thing I just said, but maybe he will add some other analysis. What I'd love to know is if he has any thoughts, like what does he think on whether or not Nvidia is overvalued.
All of the world's biggest companies, with the exception of Apple, have been spending billions, even committing trillions of dollars to an AI-centered build-out, and most of that has benefited, guess who? Nvidia. They have basically become a data center company. You can see right here that recently all their gaming PC revenue, it's basically like an afterthought. It's not relevant when we're thinking about their overall business. It
is very funny to me to still see people going like on Reddit, you'll see like people talk about Nvidia stock up or down. They'll be like, oh, Nvidia had a good week in the stock market or a bad week. And they'll be like, yeah, well, my friends all got new 5080s or whatever. Or like the new card is so overpriced, that's why. Like they talk about the gaming stuff as if it has any impact at all on this headline.
The CEO even acknowledged it. During a recent earnings report, which they beat, Jensen Huang said that expectations for Nvidia were sky high and the company was in a no-win position. He nodded to online chatter, saying if we delivered a bad quarter, if we're off by just a hair, if it looked a little bit creaky, the whole world would have fallen apart. There's no question about that, okay? You've seen some of the memes that are on the internet. We're basically holding the planet together, and it's not untrue.
I saw this leaked message from Jensen Huang. Don't know 100% if it's true, but I liked the Jim Chanos take on it, which is like, if this is a real statement that Jensen Huang said, that alone is very spooky, because this type of attitude where you're like, if we have a bad quarter, the world falls apart, is the same kind of thing that like an Enron had. It's the same kind of thing that like companies who feel a lot of pressure to massage numbers have. Now, I have never made this claim, and I'm not making this claim now. Again, I worked at Nvidia 5 years. I saw nothing of the sort. I saw a great company with really talented people. I'm just saying, historically, if a company has so much pressure on a quarterly earnings report, not a long-term trend, but a quarterly report, then they have a lot of incentive to be like, to do things that make revenue look good in the short term, but could have longer term effects. You know what I'm saying? This is just a bad sign. Like, I hope this is not a true statement, because it's not a good way to look at the market. Like if you're quarter by quarter desperate to never have anything look bad, even if you don't do it as a CEO, the pressure on the people below you is to like always just put their thumb on the scale, you know?
And actually the AI czar of America, David Sachs, agrees. He says, according to today's Wall Street Journal, AI-related investment accounts for half of GDP growth. A reversal would risk recession. We can't afford to go backwards.
Does he have the follow-up from David Sachs in this thing? Because I want to show it. I tweeted shot chaser with that quote, which is from the beginning of November, where David Sachs, our AI czar for the country, said there will be no federal bailout for AI. We have 5 major companies. If one fails, others take its place. And then now, like this week, says AI-related investment counts for half of GDP growth. A reversal would risk recession. We can't afford to go backwards, which is implying, because of his position, a federal backstop. It's implying a bailout. It's implying we cannot let this fail. And it's like so insane to have that be 1 month apart. 1 month apart. AI investment in America right now is a bigger part of GDP growth than like real estate was in 07. Like, it's insane. They're so big. The AI companies is such a big part of the stock market, of people's 401ks. It's just wild because earlier this month we talked about the Sam Altman like subtly hinting for a bailout. He's like, well, I mean, it'd be nice if the government like put some money up to make sure we could afford to keep growing AI here in America, not let China get ahead or whatever. And then there was a lot of pushback on it, and that's when David Sachs said, there's going to be no bailouts. Now they're backtracking on that. Yeah, that's a good point in chat too, is also that David Sachs is one of the guys who was nonstop crying on Twitter. This is before he was part of the administration. This is back in Biden. He was nonstop crying on Twitter to get Silicon Valley Bank bailed out. He was one of the leaders of that, like, we have to have the government step in and save Silicon Valley Bank. We have to. It's so important. The economy will collapse if we don't do it. He's a bailout guy. So I just don't trust him when he's like, there will be no bailouts for AI.
And furthering the idea that we're just all in on this one thing, I want to mention that Trump recently signed an executive order launching an AI initiative being compared to the Manhattan Project called the Genesis Mission. This is from the White House. They talk about the Genesis Mission building an integrated AI platform to harness federal scientific data sets.
I don't know if it was a clip or just on stream, but recently I talked about how I am reading more lately and more concerned lately about sneakier forms of bailouts starting to pop up. Let me explain this. I think this is like actually really interesting. When we needed a bailout last time, when we needed to like save the market with printed money, we called it quantitative easing, QE, which is really funny because what a stupid fucking name. like just call it printing money. We called it quantitative easing. And the idea was we, hit a couple keystrokes, invent some money, and then buy failing bonds to get the price back up, okay? That's the idea. And it was a creative way for the government to bail things out without it sounding like they were bailing things out, okay? But now enough people have figured, not everybody, I wouldn't say the average person, but enough people know what QE means that as we enter into, again, bad economic times, it might be hard to get that approved to do another round of massive QE. They still might do it, don't get me wrong. They're finding more and more creative ways to get stimulus money into the economy that isn't called bailouts or stimulus. And I think this is an example. Like this
See, they're integrated.
This Genesis mission is a prime example of an AI bailout that's not called an AI bailout. It's basically government money to help backstop or spend money on GPUs and data centers, help out OpenAI. Again, this is really in the weeds, but like every 10 months in America, they will invent some new place for big banks where they can turn in bad dog shit assets and get cash at the value they bought it at. These exist. Like there's so many different little facilities that exist for a bank to be like, hey, we are losing a lot of money on this thing. Can we sell it to you at full price, government? And the government goes, yes. Like this stuff is happening more and more. And that's why the reason I brought it up in the context was around crypto, where I was like, I don't know if Bitcoin will just keep crashing. It might flood up again. I'm not a crypto guy, but because Bitcoin kind of just tracks liquidity and how much money is like sloshing around in the market. And like the government seems to be preparing for like massive rounds of hidden stimulus. This is an example of that. This is like an AI one, but there's like a bunch of them. Like instead of doing one big thing of QE, they're like inventing hundreds of different little mini hidden stimuluses only for insiders and connected people and banks. It's fucking crazy. Now, they might also do actual stimulus. Trump mentioned the $2,000 check. That could happen. I got no idea if that's going to happen or not. Scott Bessent seems to hate it. Every time they interview, does anyone have the clip of Scott Bessent talking about the check?
The $2,000 dividend could come in lots of forms, in lots of ways, George. It could be just the tax decreases that we are seeing on the president's agenda.
It's obvious what he's trying to do, right? Trump is like, let's do a $2,000 check. Scott Bessent knows that's a horrible inflationary idea. So he's trying to like toe the line and be like, yeah, we could definitely do the president's agenda, and maybe it could come in the form of a tax cut that already exists. Like, he's clearly trying to massage it to where there is no actual check. But realistically, Trump might force it through because he wants a Trump check for $2,000. And people are going to demand it if they get mad enough. The response would be just insane inflation again, 2001 inflation. Okay, back to this CoffeeZilla video.
I want to talk about Nvidia's response because obviously that sets the stage for the "we are not Enron" claim. Now, I want to specifically talk about Michael Burry because he's the main thing they're responding to. Well, Michael Burry is basically making a two-pronged case so far, which is one, that there's a ton of overbuilding on supply, just like there was for the early internet, that's not necessarily tied to any revenues, and that's going to become a huge problem. And secondly, he thinks there are some accounting tricks that are happening that is basically overstating revenues. And this is in his next post called Unicorns and Cockroaches, Blessed Fraud.
Yeah,
this is where
revenues,
he takes
but
a
he fixed
deep
it.
look on the depreciation of GPUs. Now,
I was gonna say, like, the argument there is about whether or not, so really simply, like, people are saying you can use old chips because you can have it do simpler tasks. You know, if you use an AI, you can have it think for a long time or answer really quickly. Like, we can have the easy crap answers run on the old chips. That's the idea. The question becomes whether or not that can be done profitably, whether or not they can make the same amount of money on the chips. Of course you can do it. It's not the problem. And Michael Burry makes his argument in the Substack, which is pretty good. He's like, yeah, you know, airlines, when they're at max capacity, use old planes, but they don't make enough money on the old plane to justify the same cost for that year if they had depreciated over that year. Like, do you know what I'm saying? So they have to be able to sell the compute on those chips at a profitable amount of money. That is the question that hasn't been answered yet.
he says, responding to Nvidia's claim that they are not Enron, quote, "I am not claiming that Nvidia is Enron, it's clearly Cisco." And this is obviously referencing the idea that the criticism here is that this is an infrastructure over build out. All this commitment for massive, massive, massive data centers, the likes of which we've never seen.
Cisco worked in the long term though? No, I don't think anybody's arguing that. I don't think anyone is arguing that there will be no value to some innovations in AI or data centers, or it's more about the math in the coming few years not making any sense. Similar to again, this is the same argument over and over, but it's about .com. The internet was a real thing. It changed society. It changed business. It made trillions of dollars. We still had a bubble. We still had a crash. Most companies went bankrupt in the .com bubble that were part of the internet boom. Amazon lost 90% of its value. Like that can still happen even if the technology is true and right and good. When you're spending this much money this quickly and there is no returns yet, that's what's scary. It took a long time for people to figure out how to make the internet profitable, how to make it into an actual business, how to build things like profitable Amazon, Google, Facebook, YouTube, all that stuff. So that's the big question. I'm not saying there's an answer. I'm saying that's the fair question that Michael Burry's asking.
And you can kind of see here how the performance of some of their products has increased over time and decreased the amount of energy you need to generate a token. And that's going to become really relevant because, as you'll see, part of the problem for these data centers is the cost per watt. Basically, the electricity cost fundamentally is what you're pushing against.
He's talking about TPUs in this. He's talking about Google TPUs because they are more energy and cost efficient and they focus just on a specific AI task. And that alone is a big problem for NVIDIA.
And alongside that, now we can listen to Jensen explain why this performance increase eventually means that other people's GPUs are literally not worth running. And this is where I'm very sympathetic to Burry's argument, where NVIDIA sort of wants to have it both ways. They want to have a long lifespan for their products, but they also want...
I mean, this is I don't know if he has this quote in here, but I showed the quote when I talked about this of Jensen saying, bro, when we come up with the new stuff, you wouldn't even be able to give the old stuff away. And it's like that, you can't say that and then later say Michael Burry is wrong. The old stuff is actually going to retain its value really well. And it's going to be, it's going to have 6 years of useful life. That is the fundamental problem. And maybe there's like a way to thread this needle. I'm not saying it's impossible. Maybe there's so much demand for the new stuff. Maybe Nvidia's talking a little bit sweet to sell their new products and the old stuff will still have, but like it's possible at all threads, but it's an interesting thread to pull on. People have different type of feelings about Michael Burry, but having read the Substack and looked into this, I mean, it's a relevant thing to talk about.
Now, the question, of course, is, well, can they slow down? Not really, because Google is right on their heels with Gemini 3, which they supposedly developed with just their in-house TPUs, which, funny enough, the Nvidia newsroom actually commented on, saying, we are delighted by Google's success. They have made great advances in AI, and we continue to supply to Google. Nvidia is a generation ahead of the industry. It's the only platform that runs every model and does it everywhere computing is done. But within this, a lot of people sensed a cope. They were trying.
Yeah, I mean, this is super passive aggressive. We talked about this on Lemonade Stand. I don't know if it was the Patreon or the main, but it's like insane to be like, we're so happy for you, Google. We're just way better. We're just way better. And there's really no reason to be using these like, congrats on your little experiment, but there's a couple things. I do think it's odd that Nvidia has been so focused on Streisand affecting these pieces of counter narrative. Like in the past few weeks specifically, Nvidia has been like openly responding to Michael Burry, openly talking about whether or not OpenAI can afford things, talking about Google's TPU success. It feels a little scared, rather than like confident. Usually, and this is true when I worked there too, Nvidia's policy was to never talk about any of this shit. Just execute, just make stuff happen and never comment. And now they're commenting on a lot of stuff, and it feels weird. It's kind of like Sam Altman. Sam Altman keeps talking about this stuff. It's like defensive. It's like, again, I have to always give a caveat that it's not like a guarantee. It's just worth talking about. Like the best example is not even these guys. It's the fucking guy we talked about from Palantir, Alex Karp, dude. That guy was so obviously trying. Like, and I think Palantir's been way fucking down. That guy's so obviously not talking about his business and focusing on like, I'm gonna fucking kill the shorts. The shorts are evil. They don't love a good American company. He kept like, that guy is so obviously defensive over his stock price rather than assuming it'll go up if he makes a great executed product.
I should also notice that there are also cheaper open source Chinese models that are getting quite good. There's something called Kimi K2. And the question ultimately is not whether AI...
Wait, talk about that a little more. I mean, this is good setups, but... So the Chinese models, because China has been restricted to having high-end Nvidia chips, they still get them, by the way. Whether it's through Singapore smuggling and other ways, they get them, but they don't get as many. And so China has almost been forced to two things. One is develop their own chips, which are not quite there yet, but they're getting them. And the other thing is they make it more resource efficient. So China, while not having the latest and greatest top model, is usually like 6 to 8 months behind with an open source version that runs a lot cheaper. Like the inference is a lot cheaper. And because of that, it really undercuts your ability to make profit. It's like, imagine if you spend $15 billion making a new AI model that does something. Maybe it's really good at pretending to be your boyfriend. Okay, let's say you do that. And then 6 months later, there is an essentially free Chinese version that can run on way fewer GPUs. That is scary for your business. Do you understand? Like that, there's a big threat here that is kind of under-discussed. We talked about it around the DeepSeek thing, but then it was kind of ignored. But there's been more and more progress in this area. So, and what's extra interesting, this is like not talked about enough, is like, this has been good. I like this video. It kicked off a lot of discussion. Okay, the most valuable thing in AI right now is data. Whatever they can get. If they get the most quality, high quality data going in, they get the best output, right? But what's interesting, and this is what China has sort of figured out with these open source models, is like, okay, let's say OpenAI spends a fuck ton of money to get some of the best data, or they steal it or whatever. Once they make the model, you can train your model, let's say it's Kimi or let's say it's DeepSeek, by just prompting this model and getting the answers. Like you could just train your model by asking questions to this, getting the answers, and then and there's no real way to avoid this. Like if this model is to be useful, it has to be useful for training this. And so it's like very hard to maintain all this insane cost when you can be open sourced that quickly. No one's like figured out a great solution to this, man. It's like, it's not, I think it's under discussed. It makes me think that like OpenAI will never sustainably be able to generate absurd profits they would need to afford everything they're promising. That's why I still continue to think that OpenAI is the weak link. They're the weak link of the AI hype train. It's not that they're not a useful product. It's that they have to make money and they're not going to find a way. If this is true, if there's no sustainable advantage in the model, if the model can always be used to train a cheaper copy later, then the big advantage comes down to energy. It becomes not about who has the latest greatest model, because that can always be copies later. It becomes who has the most energy. And that is where China's investments have been. So I think the AI race is, I think US is leading right now, and it's between US and China, and there's no one else even close. And maybe both have their hits, but I think their strategy is around this being the focus. That's why, you know, China's opening fucking 18 nuclear power plants, bro. They're building this massive fucking grid. And however, they have a much bigger population and energy needs. And there's another sustainable argument that America's gigantic natural gas glut, we do have an absolute glut of natural gas, is also an advantage into this. It's more complicated than just saying it's simple as this, but I would say like there's a real argument to be made that model design is not going to be nearly as important as like just massive amounts of energy. Yeah, until Joey Biden sneaks in there and pulls a what on their nuclear? As Nord Stream? Joe Biden puts on the ghillie suit one last time, lands on the shores of Shenzhen, sneaks in. It's possible. He did it for Nord Stream. He could do it again. Back to the end of this video.
I'm not really going to give my opinion here. I thought it was just interesting to look at. Even if you agree with Michael Burry, that's not necessarily a reason to try to make some kind of prediction based on the markets. You never know when the markets are going to change. They can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent. And just in general, it's a bad idea to time the market. So I do not recommend you make financial trades based on any of this. It's just a look at what's happening in our world, in an industry.
We get you, CoffeeZilla. Massive shortcoming. Let's go. End of the week puts on Nvidia with all my net worth. Okay, well, I'm a little disappointed in the ending because he just covered the things we've talked about, but it did kick off a lot of discussion, which was interesting, and I thought that was a good summary.